Hello, everybody, and here at the TortureCast today, we are joined by, at one point, we would have had to introduce her as Hanging Sliders, but now she's actually, I would say, better known by her name, Wendy Thurm, writer for Fangraphs and SB Nation. How are you doing, Wendy?
I'm great, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So, you've really, I think, come into your own as a baseball blogger in the last year or two, and one of the things that's come out of that is you made a trip down to spring training this year. Have you been to spring training before, or was that something new for you?
I've been to spring training before. Usually it's a trip that I make with my family. I have two kids, 11 and 8, and we're season ticket holders for the Giants, and usually, get down to Arizona with the kids. Last year, so not this year, but in 2011, I made my first solo trip, and that was just at the beginning when I was launching my Hanging Sliders blog. And so I went down last year for about 5 days and, just took a lot of notes and a lot of photos and was, doing a lot of background work for the blog. This year, I was there for kind of 3 reasons. One was we have a kind of a Fangraphs get-together at spring training every year. Mm-hmm. It's my first one. It's a social weekend where as many writers as can kind of find the time and the plane fare to meet in Arizona, and then we hang out and watch a lot of baseball. There's the Fangraphs staff fantasy draft, which I'm not doing this year, but that involved a lot of late nights, laptops, and beer. It was fun to watch. So that was the first weekend. Then I took in games the following week. I think I went to I think the only stadium I missed on this trip was Salt River. And Scottsdale Stadium, which I'd spent a lot of time at last year.
That almost seems strange that you would make it out to go and watch Giants games and not make it to Scottsdale Stadium. Or did you watch some other games besides the Giants as well?
Yeah, I did. I saw the Giants twice on the road. I saw them. The first game I saw Lincecum pitch against the Royals in Surprise Stadium. And then I saw them play the Cubs at Hohokam Park in Mesa. I saw, the first game was the A's and the Reds. That was Cespedes' debut.
Oh, that must have been fun.
Yeah, it was fun. The next day we saw the Angels and the Indians, and the Angels won something like 17-2. It was a little bit boring.
That's kind of a depressing metaphor for what might happen in the season, I suspect.
Yeah, I wasn't really that surprised. Well, Chris Perez didn't pitch very much in spring training, which you have to kind of question why Manny Acta had in there in the save situation yesterday. But, yeah, their pitching was definitely erratic when I saw them. And I saw them several times in spring training. So, in fact, so then the one day I saw the Indians play against Yu Darvish. That was cool to see Darvish pitch. I saw the Cubs play the Brewers and then the Cubs and the Giants. Yeah, I think it was 6 games in 8 days. And then on the back end of the trip, I was at the Sabre Analytics Conference, which was really, really enjoyable.
Well, that's right. I remember seeing you tweet about that a little bit at the end of the trip. That sounded like a really neat thing on the show we always joke that I'm the one that should be living in his mother's basement, even though the first time we made that joke, I was actually sitting on my mother's second floor at the time. But it's kind of a step up, I suppose.
The conference really was tremendous. In many ways, it was a little bit of, confirmation bias. I mean, it was, hearing a lot of things from kind of industry insiders that's, kind of consistent with what I already write about and what I know about, particularly from working at Fangraphs.
You're not going to invite Brian Sabian to a Sabermetrics conference, for example. So, I can certainly understand that.
Right. Actually, as it turns out, according to the program, the Giants and the Dodgers were both 2 of the team sponsors of the program. I didn't the opportunity to meet anybody with the Giants who may have been attending. I did meet someone from the A's who was there, and they were, there were folks from many. I think there was something like 20-something out of the 30 teams had representatives at the conference at one point or another. But it was, it was getting to hear There was a GM panel that had Chris Antonetti from the Indians, Bob Melvin from the Brewers, and Jerry DiPoto from the Angels. That was really interesting. There was a sit down with Mark Shapiro from the Indians, the president, the former GM. There was a talk from Tom Ricketts, the new Cubs owner, or relatively new Cubs owner.
Right.
So, I mean, that kind of stuff was really neat. I got to meet John Doohan, kind of, he's the fielding Bible guy and originally started Stat Inc. John Thorne, the baseball historian. So, I mean, in that respect, it was, getting to meet a lot of people like that. And, to have people say, I really enjoy your work too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's gotta be. And, you've been getting a lot of exposure working with Fangraphs and with SB Nation and different other outlets, besides just going through your own occasionally tended Hanging Sliders blog.
Yeah, occasionally tended would be a little bit of an overstatement at the moment. It's I would say it's on hiatus because I'm
working on other projects. Yeah.
I'm working on other projects. Exactly.
It's very diplomatic way to put it. Well, I mean, one of the things that we do, of course, want to talk about on the show with you, though, is Giants baseball, since, you do profess as a Giants fan, although you spend plenty of time getting to talk about everybody else. But
I write a lot about the Giants at those other outlets, so.
Definitely. And I mean, one of the things that I want to talk about that's been really exciting for Giants fans to kind of see is the growth of Madison Bumgarner. I don't know if you got to see him pitch at all at spring training, but I think everybody already has a feeling that Bumgarner is really he's really in the point where he's going to find his own this year after, having a good year where he got caned a little bit last year. Not a lot of run support, but some excellent pitching nonetheless. I think that this is going to be a good year for him. And it seems like everybody on the internet seems to agree with us on this. I've seen a lot of picks for Madison Bumgarner for Cy Young. I've seen a lot of picks for Madison Bumgarner as a second ace fitting in between Kane and Lincecum. I mean, what are your opinions on this from what you've seen, and maybe even from a little bit of a statistical analysis standpoint?
Well, I mean, I haven't done I haven't looked that closely. I'm just pulling up stats right now on Fangraphs.
That's okay. I'm doing the same thing. So
yeah. So I mean, in the Fangraphs staff predictions, I picked Bumgarner as my Cy Young Award winner. He showed he just showed tremendous strength down the stretch. Remember, he started last year 0-7 with kind of absurdly high ERA as a result of that game against
Minnesota. That one was ridiculous. I was actually listening for that game, and I remember just cringing every time he would pitch. And,
it was like, I mean, the odds of that kind of start happening, I mean, that's one of those just complete outliers, but look, they are humans, right? I mean, some days you wake up and you just don't have it, whatever it is that you do. And you have something going on in your life, or something's out of whack or whatever it is. So, I mean, it just happens. And even for professional athletes, it just happens. I wrote for Baseball Nation yesterday on SB Nation about kind of Pedro Martinez's opening day performance in 2002, which was in the middle of his, just when he was completely dominating baseball in 99.
That was the Pedro Martinez year. Yeah, really. That series of years.
99, he won 23 games. And in 2002, he won 20 games. Those are the only 20-game seasons he had. But that was Pedro Martinez, and just saying he had a complete clunker on opening day of 2002. He gave up, I think, 7 hits, 8 runs in 3 innings, was pulled, and the Red Sox lost the game, 11-10. So it happens. He still ended with like 2.26 ERA. So, but anyway, getting back to Bumgarner, when they watch him pitch and they see his stuff, they use words like filthy and dirty and nasty. They used to use dirty, I guess, to describe Jonathan Sanchez, but maybe that always had another meaning. I don't.
Let's maybe not discuss that one on family radio. I don't even know if this qualifies as family radio anymore, but
not safe for women and children. So, I mean, I think. I'm looking at Bumgarner's stats now. I mean, his velocity has been going up every year on his fastball and on his slider. So, it looks like he's throwing his slider about a third of the time, and his slider is coming in, not that much slower than his fastball. So, that's hard for the hitters. Plus, he's got, I don't know if they call it a true 3/4 release, but he has a pretty deceptive motion where
Right.
his
It all comes from kind of the same arm slot.
Right, and it will sweep across the plate, and it's been, as effectively devastating against lefties and righties, even though he's a lefty. So, he, as Mike Krukow likes to say, he's learning to be a pitcher and not a thrower.
Right.
So he's learning, how to maximize kind of the pitch selection and the order of when he throws certain pitches, studying the hitters and what their tendencies are, going up there, with a plan for each batter, and being consistently around the zone, but not, in the zone so much where, he gets teed up. So, and he's incredibly intense out there. I mean, I think he's a really, really fun pitcher to watch. I think in that way, Kane, Lincecum, Bumgarner, they might all end up with fairly similar results in terms of what the box score says. Mm-hmm. They have such unbelievably different approaches. Bumgarner, I think, is probably the most intense on the mound. Kane is more stoic. Lincecum,
right.
Is
Lincecum's kind of fiery and yet laid back at the same time, and no one knows how he does it. Yeah.
So, lefties generally, can kind of tend to have an advantage in the league. He's been getting stronger, mixing up his pitches. Velocity has been, good and getting better. Mm-hmm. He looked great in the spring. And, he's going to be pitching a lot of games against, somewhat weak lineups, which presumably will make his stats look good, but then will cut against him, in the end.
As far as balloting, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't hurt Clayton Kershaw, that's for sure.
True. It hasn't hurt. Lincecum's gone and turned over horrible lineups more than a few times, and he's gotten 2 Cy Youngs out of it because he's just that good. So, it's nothing to say that it can't have an effect, but I definitely see what you mean. It's the NL West.
Right. I think the thing that Giants fans can be most excited about is, now that the Kane extension is done, I don't think people are, flipping out yet about whether the Giants are going to be able to re-sign Lincecum, because that's, they got the 2-year deal done.
Right.
But now there's some breathing room, kind of for the Giants and for Lincecum to kind of see if he starts to elevate his game again. His Lincecum's peripherals have not been moving in the right direction.
Right.
I wrote about that on Fangraphs when I talked about, heading into when they were exchanging arbitration numbers, what I thought a fair number was. And I actually ended up nailing it, I think, within $500,000 of the end budget.
Wow.
I also nailed the Kane contract pretty closely, too. So
for numbers as high as those, that's pretty impressive. Although, in fairness, I would say that Thomas from Giants Pod got pretty close to nailing it when we did our predictions last week, just because he was pointing out, well, between 100, 110, 120, where do you put it? And he was like, around 110 seems about right. And that's definitely how it turned out, including the options and the signing bonus and everything else.
Right.
So, I think that everybody sort of had the same general idea for where both of those pitchers needed to be because of the relative value of them compared to others. But I think that it is interesting to point out, like, that sort of, even though we aren't freaking out about it now, it does kind of give us this 2-year window. So in a way, this year doesn't have to be the push for it, there is no chance year. We kind of can actually relax and take it a little bit easier, and that may even help the team out on the mound and at the plate, I feel like. You mean this year going forward in terms of winning or in terms of locking Lincecum down? Well, in terms of playing, there's not necessarily that concern that, we have to push and try and do everything this year, or that there's this added sense of pressure because it's not a walk year for Lincecum. We don't have to worry about negotiations, and we know that he's going to still be with the team the next year, as well as pretty much most of the entire rotation. Vogelsong is on a 2-year contract as well. Zito obviously is going nowhere. So, we're almost, barring anything happening, I'm going to go knock on wood over here, we're pretty much guaranteed to have the whole rotation back next year. Yeah, but I mean, that's true. I'm going to go knock on wood again. That includes Zito, so there is ups and downs to that. Well, yeah, I just put Zito aside, but now they're all healthy and they're pitching well. So I definitely don't subscribe to they don't have to go for it. In fact, that's kind of been my main criticism of the Giants
front office over the last several years, and I took a little bit of grief for that online this week. But my main complaint basically is they've had not just a good pitching staff, but an outstanding pitching staff. And, even with an outstanding pitching staff, it's hard to make the playoffs and it's hard to win. I just think that the front office missed opportunities to put the best team on the field offensively every year they could with that pitching staff, which until this year was fairly well cost controlled. So yes, I agree with you. Looking ahead to next year, it'll look presumably just as good, but someone could end up with Tommy John surgery. Someone could get hurt. So, I think you have to, if I were running a team, I think you have to really take advantage of opportunities when they're there for you. And, I don't think there's any question that the Giants did not put the best bang for the buck offense on the field last year.
Pretty sure most people would agree with you on that.
And nor did they in 2009. So they did, I don't think they won the World Series by luck, but there was definitely luck involved.
Right? I would say that it wasn't sort of this overpowering level of offensive skill that carried us through the World Series.
Well, the other two was, they didn't plan on the Burrell thing, and that worked out. And that was a lot like Huff and Rowan telling the front office to take a chance on him.
Right.
And the Cody Ross thing, happened because we were trying to block the Padres. But what people don't remember, or people tend to forget, is Cody Ross wasn't played very much down the stretch. Bochy kept playing Jose Guillen. Right. And it was unclear that Ross was actually even going to make the postseason roster. And it wasn't until Guillen ran into some performance-enhancing drug issues that the Giants were alerted to right before they had to make their roster. That Ross even made the postseason roster. So to suggest there's not luck involved is a little bit short-sighted. But in any event, I agree. I think the pitching staff, should they stay healthy, is primed for another, spectacular year. By statistics alone, they actually pitched better last year than they did in 2010 when they won the World Series. And that was largely as a result of switching out Vogelsong, for Zito. Right. Kane, got better, and Bumgarner pitched for a whole year. So, I'm very pleased with the decisions that they made in terms of the opening day roster. I think I praise them for, finally kind of saying we're going to go, not just go young, but we're going to put our best offensive team out there and not kind of try and do kind of half the best offensive team and half the good defensive team,
and try and squeeze all the older players in just so that they'll feel better about it. I think that we've come to the point where sort of even they kind of realize what shift needs to happen with the team, and I think that we're finally seeing that reflected with Bochy and Sabian's decisions, which is not something I actually thought. We've been getting panned pretty much by anybody who sort of has watched what happened to Brandon Belt last year and has cracked all kinds of jokes about, are they even going to play him this year? And he's going to be great if he ever gets any playing time. And I think it was really a surprise to everybody that Brandon Belt was named the starting first baseman for this year, and that it actually sounds like he's going to get some time to play. And I think that's going to be a huge paradigm shift.
I hope so.
Well, yeah. I may be being blindly optimistic here, but sometimes we're good at that in this fandom. So
I am not one of those. But that's okay.
That's okay. If you had listened to our season preview last week, there was a lot of Thomas saying that he was a realist, and the rest of us taking the over on things we probably shouldn't have taken the over on. So we're being dutiful fans and letting hope spring eternal, I guess. But actually, that brings me to one other thing I wanted to ask, because I actually noticed that with the addition of a lot of this youth and speed and younger players, we're seeing sort of a different look for the Giants as far as which players have sort of had prominence on the team, especially because a lot of the ones who are with us for the World Series either aren't around now or are still injured. But that said, so one thing I wanted to ask you was, if you were going to build a franchise right now, let's say that you could pick one player who's a Giant and one player who is not a Giant, who are the two players that you'd pick to start a franchise if you were doing it right now?
I'd pick Bumgarner as my pitcher, and who'd I pick? Let's see, offensively. It kind of pains me to say it. I'd probably pick Tulowitzki.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge Tulowitzki fan, not just because of the rivalry. I don't know. Everyone seems to think he's, one of the best, or two best, or three best players in the game right now. I'm not sure I agree with that. But to have a shortstop that strong defensively, who can put up the numbers he can, I mean, that's just huge. I mean, there aren't very many shortstops who can do what Tulowitzki can do on either side of the ball.
Right. I mean, old Jimmy Rollins, maybe, and beyond that, we're not seeing a whole lot of people who are kind of in Tulowitzki's caliber. Although, I mean, there is always the talk that some of his numbers are maybe inflated by playing at Coors Field, but the fact remains that he can get the bat on the ball, and he as a defensive shortstop, he definitely does very well. And it's sort of the combination of what we had hoped for out of, well, I want to say what we had quote unquote hoped for out of Orlando Cabrera, but everyone kind of set their expectations really low for him. But sort of combined with what we're hoping for from Brandon Crawford, which is a stellar defensive play. So I can definitely understand that pick.
Yeah, you might want to edit out putting Orlando Cabrera in the same sentence with Troy Tulowitzki is strange. Nobody was hoping for any such thing, I don't think. No person who knows anything about baseball, honestly, I have to say. I think that was
he was
kind
a proven contender. No.
That was really the low point of last year, as far as I was concerned. But let's not rehash that. So, Tulowitzki would be on my list. I really, really like Ian Kinsler as a player. Mm-hmm. I think he's the best all-around player on the Rangers. And just because of who the Rangers are, Josh Hamilton, Beltre, some of the other things, Darvish, I think Kinsler kind of gets overlooked, but he's really a fantastic player. I think he's kind of the next Chase Utley. And again, with that. Rivalry aside, I've always liked Utley, watching Utley play. I think it's just terrible for the game, if his health, keeps him from another, 5-6 years of, kind of Utley-like play and production. He's just an incredibly fun, player to watch. I don't know that I'd build a team around him because he's been inconsistent. But I think that Pablo is, I think he's really a terrific all-around player. I think he needs to show more consistency, both in terms of staying healthy, batting from both sides of the plate, and, keeping up what was really outstanding defense last year.
Right, definitely.
I'd say those would be three that I'd look at, but Bumgarner for sure.
Right, definitely.
He's 22 years old, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
He's really young.
This good at 22. Somebody should outlaw that, but we're just going to take advantage. No, I agree, though. Bumgarner is, especially for his age, especially on the mound, he's shown a real level of maturity. With the start that he had last year, he's very likable, but just he's got sort of that down home charm that we always joke about with Kane. But he's a little bit more expressive. He's very intense on the mound, just like you said, and he makes sense as a face of the franchise kind of guy. I feel like if in 2 years we were to lose Timmy and then in a few more years lose Kane, I feel like if you had Madison Bumgarner as the face of the franchise's pitching rotation, you'd be in a pretty good spot. Fans are really going to kind of flock to the kind of the presence he puts on the mound, and he's also just really good.
Yeah.
So I definitely can understand that. One of the things I did want to ask you about that was this one was a little bit sillier. So last night, as you may have heard on Twitter, last night was the Giants bloggers fantasy baseball draft. Got a little bit ridiculous, which was pretty funny. We may talk about this on the show today, in which case I'm going to have all kinds of ridiculous things to talk about, mainly mentioning Chris from Bay City Balls team, because he went ahead and let the computer auto draft for him and didn't realize how highly we were going to value every single Giants player that came up on the board. We're not biased at all.
I saw something on Twitter suggesting that Chris ended up with a fairly odd team.
Chris picked up a couple of guys like Jorge De La Rosa, who may not be back until June, or Takashi Saito. So
Right.
I'm hoping that he can get some good transaction. I almost want to like spot him a starting pitcher or something because I just feel really bad about it. But one of the things that we talked about sometime after Buster Posey went for probably about $30 more than he should have in an auction draft, we were joking about a couple of statistics like having it over a replacement player.
Right.
For the people who haven't seen the Buster Posey, I ain't having it GIF. It's a phrase that's cited to him. And when Brian McCann came up, we talked about, well, what's his having it over a replacement player? And of course, the fact that lined out to the abbreviation HORP just made it more exciting. We also talked about Ted Lilly and his not Zito above replacement player value.
Right.
We talked about the glasses over 9 value of Eric Sogard and of Tyler Clippard. So I mean, it's all pretty ridiculous, and there are of course always ways for sabermetricians to be able to have fun with what they do. But one of the things that I would want to ask is, I mean, what are a couple of stats or kind of stats for particular players, whether real or imagined stats, that the Giants should be paying special attention to this season?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, it's kind of basic, but and I agree with those that say you can't reduce a player, to one number.
Of course.
But Fangraphs weighted on base average, otherwise known as WOBA or WOBA or however it might get pronounced. But
right. WOBA Chamberlain.
It has and there have been several posts on the not graph side of Fangraphs about how one goes about properly pronouncing weighted OBA. But weighted on base average by Fangraphs is on base percentage, but it takes into account league and park effects. I think that's right. So it's kind of the truest number in which you can distill, how much that person is getting on base, how much the player is getting on base, and which is the goal, right? Get on base, move over, score.
Right.
So it's kind of the truest measure of how often a player is contributing positively to the offense. So I think Giants fans and Giants insiders, would do well to pay a lot of attention to that number.
Yeah, and I mean, taking a look at WOBA for the Giants last year, I mean, besides Santiago Casilla, who has a 692 from his potted plant standing in the corner at bat, Carlos Beltran actually led the team in WOBA with a 390, followed by Pablo at 379 and Brett Pill at 361. So I mean, that certainly seems pretty, like as a measure of three of the, obviously this is disregarding the number of at-bats. So, I mean, you could put a qualifier in there, but, looking at just those three, that's three people that definitely had a major offensive impact with the Giants last year. And so, I mean, you're telling right there, these are people that are able to get on base, whether it's through hits or whether it's through walks or even through hit, it's definitely a good measure as opposed to, overvaluing somebody who happens to have a really high average but isn't necessarily providing a lot of production, or somebody who's providing a lot of RBIs but isn't necessarily hitting well. He's just sort of, falls into them because the people ahead of him are hitting well, or that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's definitely a good way to kind of measure that value, I feel like.
I think, in terms of offense, that's kind of my favorite. In terms of defense, I get something out of kind of all of the major defensive metrics, with the caveat that they're all definitely still works in progress.
Right.
I like defensive runs saved, which is something it's a fielding Bible stat, but it's available on graphs. Those, it's a judgment call, but they watch every single play and they're making judgments and they're valuing players at each position relative to other players in the league. So, if you look at Brandon Crawford and see he's a +9, that means, he's saving 9 runs more than the average shortstop, in the league. So, I really like that measure. In terms of, non-traditional kind of funny stats, I've noticed that, there always is in baseball, but even from opening day yesterday, I've noticed already quite a bit of creativity with facial hair. So it would probably be something with, facial hair above replacement or some kind of facial hair stat.
I was going to say, I'm hearing that Jason Mott is gaining value in that category, among others. So,
yeah, obviously the Giants bullpen would be off the charts for that. And let me just say, when I talk about facial, I'm not a fan of the Wilson beard, and that's kind of all I'm going to say about it.
Right.
I'm a little bit tired of the shtick. I wish it would just stop being something that gets talked about and marketed, because I just think it's kind of old. Let's move on.
Right.
If the guy wants to shave it, let him shave it. If the guy doesn't want to shave it, I don't care, but let's stop talking about it.
Okay. I can understand that.
That's kind of my view.
I still think it's hilarious that when everybody else on the team started growing their beards out, that's right when Javier Lopez decided to shave his. And I was sort of like, all right, way to be a rebel, fella.
Well, Javier Lopez, he does do things a little bit different than everybody else, so that doesn't surprise me.
Of course, it'd be the side armor that decides to shave his beard when everybody else isn't. Yeah. And I would say that there was one other thing of course, we've always got one question that we ask ourselves on this show, and so it only makes sense to ask it to you as well. We always ask, why will the Giants win it all? What is it that's going to take the Giants to and beyond the World Series this year? And I think that there's definitely a lot of reasons that we could come up with, but I want to hear what your opinion is on why the Giants will win it all this season.
I didn't even pick them to win the National League West. So,
touche.
Why will if
this is the one time I'm forcing you into blind optimism.
This is why they'll do it. They will get stellar pitching again. They will, and that will include decent fifth starter stuff from Zito. So getting through 5 without having a game completely out of hand. 2/3 of the time he takes the ball. That's what I would say. I'd say we'd get that would require a very decent fourth starter kind of performance from Vogelsong. We do not need him to pitch like he did last year, but something just very solid and consistent would be great. He'll be a better number 4 than a lot of other teams have.
Right.
And the top 3 need to do what they need to do. On the other side of the ball, I think we need, a big year from Posey, a big year from Pablo. And frankly, I think Velt's going to have to produce now. We've all been clamoring for it, not just in place of Huff, but because there seems to be a fairly wide consensus that Belt, kind of has the tools. He has the on-base tools. He has the power tools. He's not particularly fast, but he's an excellent, defensive first baseman.
Right.
And he, we're now all in on that, and so he has to produce. So a solid year from Cabrera. I don't know that he'll do what he did last year, but I don't want to see him regress at all. To where he was with the Braves and the Yankees. That would not be good. So, I'm not saying we need career years out of everybody on the offensive side of the ball, but we need kind of really solid years from a lot of players to get back to the playoffs and win. So
yeah,
that's what I would say.
All right.
And we need everyone to stay healthy. Obviously, that was huge last year.
That always seems to be the caveat with this team. Is sort of like, and we need to not break everyone in half this time around. So there is that.
In 2010, they were incredibly lucky.
Yeah,
they
agreed.
hardly any injuries at all, and that was a huge, huge factor.
Definitely.
In how they won. Remember, they didn't get it until the very last day of the season. So one injury, 2 injuries could have
changes
really
everything. Yeah.
Affected that. So.
All right. Well, Wendy, you've definitely improved our valuable insight over replacement podcast stat today. So
fantastic.
Thanks a lot for coming on. We really appreciate it. And, we're looking forward to seeing what you put out for our reading enjoyment this season. And, if our listeners want to check out some more of what you've been working on, where can they find you?
So everything I write gets linked to through my Twitter, which is Hanging Sliders, HANGING Sliders. I also appear on Fangraphs, usually Tuesdays and Thursdays. I appear on Baseball Nation usually one weekday, and on the weekend, that schedule is somewhat changeable. I am joining starting a new column up next week, but that hasn't been announced yet. But if you follow me on Twitter, you'll be able to find that, and maybe a few other places that people have heard about coming on the pike. So I can't say now, but it's very exciting. I'm going to be very busy this season, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, definitely, if people want to keep an eye out on what Wendy's up to, you can do that at Hanging Sliders on Twitter. You can also check out her work on Fangraphs, SB Nation, and a variety of other sites. Just keep posted through her Twitter, and she'll be posting all that up. And before we go, Chad did want me to ask you one question, which is, Wendy, can you in fact hit a hanging slider?
I could probably throw a hanging slider better than I can hit a hanging slider. Depending who's throwing it. I mean, if my 11-year-old was throwing a hanging slider, yeah, I could probably hit that.
All right.
Professionally, hanging slider, no.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the show, Wendy, and we hope to have you again sometime.
I'd be delighted. Thanks so much. Go Giants.
All right.